Hello to all friends and colleagues in Tehran, elsewhere in Iran, and also to international participants around the world. Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Parry from Prague, and I've been asked by the organizing committee for the first International Congress of ISMA to give a keynote paper on the theme of esports. I thank the organizers very much for inviting me. I wish I could be there in Tehran with you, but we all know the present circumstances. For the organizers, I prepared this short video with an accompanying PowerPoint presentation and a much longer article published recently in Sport, Ethics and Philosophy, which I hope will be distributed. So let's start. If I ask the question, are esports really sports? I first need to establish some kind of concept of sport. If I ask, is A B, I have to ask what B is first. So, are esports sports? Well, what is sports? Well, now people use the word sport to refer to all sorts of things. Hunting, shooting, fishing are field sports. We call them field sports in the UK. But hunting and killing animals, that's not sport. Bullfighting, that's a blood sport. Well, bullfighting is not a sport. Jogging is called recreational sport, but jogging is not a sport. Chess and bridge are called mind sports. They're not sports either. Dance wants to be dance sport. Yoga wants to be yoga sport. So our question is, are all these things really sports? Does anything count as a sport if somebody says it is? Does e-sport count as a sport just because somebody says it is? Somebody wants it to be thought of as a sport. I say, no, it's not. Esports isn't a sport. My line is, this is esports. Digga, 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 digga. Thousands of children all over the world. Digga, 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 digga. Why do they want to call computer games like that? Why do they want to call them esports? My answer is, because they want to associate computer games that you play in your bedroom in a sedentary fashion. They want to associate esports with the healthy and moral connotations of real sport. They want people to think of computer games in your bedroom as something like a sport, which it isn't. So that's my line. So you've got my conclusion first. My conclusion is esports are not sports, but I need an argument to support that. So what argument do I have? Well, firstly, I offer a stipulation and then a definition. I stipulate what I have in mind when I'm thinking about sport. I'm thinking Olympic sport, because everybody accepts that Olympic sport is sport, right? Well, everybody accepts that. It's the paradigm case of sport. And so look at all the Olympic sports and ask yourself, what are their essential characteristics? My answer to that is, if you analyze those sports, you'll find that they have 6 necessary conditions. Sports are institutionalized, rule-governed contests of human physical skill. Now, I think the justification for that stipulation is, first of all, it's uncontroversial. Everybody agrees with it. Secondly, it's normative. I think it's a good conception of sport. It's a desirable version of sport for the future. That's the second reason for justifying the stipulation. But the most important reason for the present circumstances is promoters of esports agree with me on this. How do I know that? Because they're trying their darndest to get into the Olympic club. Esports are applying to be part of the Olympics. So even the promoters of esports accept that the Olympic conception of sport is central to the idea of what sport is. So they agree with me. Okay, so let's now turn to the justification for the definition. That's the stipulation. Here's the definition. I offer a conceptual analysis which clarifies the concept of sport by offering construals of the 6 first level terms. Remember, the conclusion is going to be competitive computer games don't qualify as sport. Even if they resemble sport in certain ways, they're not sports, right? So here's the concept of sport. 6 criteria: human, physical, skill, contest, rule governed, institutionalized. This gives you a demarcation criterion. It tells you what is not sport. For example, if it's human, no animals. Well, you have horses, but the horses are always under the control of the human. So the human is the primary actor in sport. No machines. Well, you have bicycles, don't you? That's a kind of machine. And you have boats. That's a kind of machine. Yes, but they're machines that are mainly powered and directed by humans. So you have yachting, but you don't have motorboats. You have bicycles, but you don't have motorbikes. Why not? It's because the motor is the thing that is at least partly, mainly responsible for the performance of the vehicle. And sport is about the human. So that's why you don't have motorsports in the Olympics. Okay, it's physical, so it's not chess. Sure, you have to move this. You have to move your pieces about on the board, right? But the point is, in chess, the movements, the actual movements you make on the board, are not relevant to the outcome of the game, because you can play chess on the computer. You don't have to make movements at all. You don't have to move your pieces physically. Huh? So you can even tell somebody else to move the pieces for you, right? So in chess, whatever physical movements you might want to make, they're not relevant to the outcome. In sport, the physical movements directly produce the outcome. Sport is skilled. Jogging isn't. You don't need skill to jog. You don't need any special skills. You might think you don't need any special skills to walk. Well, you don't need special skills to walk. But if you're doing race walking, you do need special skills. And your special skills are monitored by judges on the course who will disqualify you if you don't walk properly according to the proper defined skills, right? So walking is not a sport, but race walking is, and the difference is skill level. Contest. All sports are contests. So mountaineering, even though it's very physical and it requires lots of skills and humans do it, right? So mountaineering requires human physical skill, but mountaineering is not a contest. In a contest, this happens. I go ping, you go pong. I go ping, you go pong. I do something, you do something. Right, you're climbing a mountain. What's the mountain going to do next? Mountain is just going to sit there. It's not going to do anything. So there's no contest between you and the mountain. Mountaineering is a challenge, but it's not a contest. All sports are rule governed. Well, field sports aren't. I come from a family, agricultural family, people working on farms. And when they go out with their guns to kill animals, there are no rules. You just go out there and shoot something. No rules at all. But sports are rule governed. So when you have clay pigeon shooting in the Olympics, there are definite rules about how the game proceeds. And if you don't have rules, you can't have an outcome, right? You can't have a winner. Okay. And all sports are institutionalized. All sports have international federations, national federations, local federations, and those federations act so as to organize the activity. So they're the 6 criteria for sport. If I had time, I'd go on to show how those 6 criteria both give a demarcation criterion, which tells you what sport is not, but they also give a set of values showing the values of those necessary characteristics of sport. And I want to go on to say that those values are in fact the values of Olympism, the values of sport when played in the right manner and the right spirit. Now, so we've got a concept of sport. Now, well, are esports sports? Well, it depends what you mean by esports, because not all video games are competitive. So we rule out those video games that are profile upgrading exercises, right? So we're not talking about those kinds of computer games. Neither are we talking about kinetic esports, you know, like a Wii tennis. When you make tennis-like shots with your arm and the controller is on your arm, so you're not going digga 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 dig. The controller is here and it affects digital representations on a screen. I don't want to talk about kinetic esports in this presentation, although I've got plenty to say about them. The main reason we don't want to talk about them is they're not as popular as esports like war strategy and one-person shooter games. These are the really popular games that are now being touted as esports, and these are the games that are seeking Olympic status. It's a notable point that no kinetic esport has applied to the International Olympic Committee to be an esport, to be a sport on the Olympic program. You'd think that a sport that tries to replicate tennis with physical movements would be the ideal thing to. No, it's not those. It's those esports that are strategy games and shooter games and so on. And that's one of the problems, is the ethical problem with shooter games. But we're not going to get into that. That's one of Thomas Bach's objections. But let's get into that. Our question is whether or not they're counter sports, not whether they're ethical or not. That's a separate question. So we have 6 criteria. Now, of the 6 criteria, obviously competitive computer games are competitive and they're rule governed. So that's 2 of the criteria satisfied. 4 criteria remain: human, physical, skill, and institutionalized. So let's go through them very quickly one by one. Firstly, human. The problem with computer games is that contestants are physically distanced from the action. They're contesting over what they can make happen on a screen as a result of their manipulations of a console. The contest is, in a sense, human versus human, in the way that any contest is, like a spelling contest is human versus human. It's not a sport, but they're not contesting humans. They are not, in their special armchairs, direct competitors. They are distanced, image manipulating remote controllers. And so the contest is inadequately human. It's not a contest of human against human. Secondly, physical. Well, sure, there's some kind of physical action and effort in computer gaming, as in many, many other things that are not sports. Gardening, for example, requires a lot of effort and physical action and not a little skill. But it's not a sport, is it? So physical action and effort, we've got to think twice about this. The sporting sense of physical requires that the movements bear a direct relation to the outcome of the event. The actual movements must directly produce the result. And in computer games, they don't. You make movements in one domain, the actual real domain here, and these movements are separated from the effect, which is in another domain. It's in a virtual domain. So your physical jiggling and joggling like this has to be transposed into an indirect effect in a virtual domain. So it's not adequately physical. Thirdly, skill. All sports require skills, of course, but not all skills are sports skills. So just because gaming requires skill of some kind, digga, 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 I've got to do it lots of times in 1 second. It's very skillful in a way. Does that qualify as a sport? No. Piano playing, you have to make many movements every second, and it's very physical and so on. But is piano playing a sport? No, it's not. Sports require whole body skills that are required for successful engagement in the sport. And the problem with computer games is that they don't. They require dig a dig a dig dig a dig a dig 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 dig, while the rest of your body just slumps in some armchair. Okay, and it doesn't matter how effortful your jiggling and joggling are. In the same way, it doesn't matter how much stamina you need to play a game of chess or a game of bridge. That's irrelevant, right? Because what we're looking for is whole body skilled engagement. And of course, going back to the idea of Olympism, this is what contributes to the development of the whole human, the all-round development of the human being. Do you get the all-round development of the human being through computer games? I don't think so. You get sedentary individuals with problems with gaining weight and burnout before the age of 20. Institutionalization. Well, this is a bit of a difficult point, but the idea is something like this, that all sports cannot be owned by anybody. Nobody owns football. FIFA runs it for the time being anyway, or runs part of it. UEFA runs bits of it. The Football League run bits of it. The Football Association run bits of it. I don't know. Football is run administered and run by all sorts of organizations, but none of them own it. You can't own football, right? It belongs to the world. But esports are defined by executive ownership. That's to say, somebody wrote the code, somebody owns that code, has copyrighted that code, somebody wants to make money out of that code. So they organize competitions for their games owned by them so they can make money. So you can institutionalize that kind of activity in some way or another. And this is what the esports community is trying to do. It's trying to set up some body, and they call it institutionalization. All they're doing is associating, making a group of these people getting together for mutual benefit so that they can all make extra money. But they can't be institutionalized the way that sports are, because esport coding is owned by somebody, right? So they can't be institutionalized like sports are institutionalized. So my conclusion is esports aren't sports because they are inadequately human. They lack direct physicality. They fail to employ decisive whole body control and whole body skill. And their patterns of creation, production, ownership, and promotion make institutionalization difficult, if not impossible. And so my conclusion is esports are not sports. Thank you very much.